A rat is basically a potato with anxiety. It is a fist-sized lump of fur that runs like it owes somebody money, eats things you would not touch with a shovel, lives in walls, crawls through sewers, and somehow has a tail that looks like an electrical cable after somebody peeled the insulation off. For most people in the United States, that is enough information. Rat equals dirty. Rat equals disease. Rat equals call somebody. It absolutely does not equal dinner. And yet that reaction gets strange the moment you step outside the cultural bubble that created it. Because humans have eaten rodents for a very long time. Not starving humans. Not people trapped in some survival situation. Ordinary people, farmers, families, restaurant customers, wedding guests. Across different parts of Asia, Africa, and other regions of the world, certain rodents have been hunted, raised, sold, cooked, seasoned, roasted, fried, and served as completely legitimate food. Some are field rats. Some are cane rats. Some are bamboo rats. Some are other rodent species that happen to occupy the exact same biological order as the animal that makes you lift your feet when something moves under a subway seat. And that creates a very uncomfortable question. If a rodent can be meat in one place and vermin in another, what exactly changed? Because the animal did not sit down one morning and decide to become disgusting. We did that part. To understand how, you have to go back to a world before concrete. Dumpsters, subway tunnels, restaurant alleys, and apartment buildings gave rats the worst possible public relations campaign in animal history. For most of human existence, people did not encounter rodents primarily in sewers. They encountered them in landscapes, fields, grasslands, rice paddies, forest edges, grain stores, places where small animals were simply part of the local ecology. And if you were a farmer working all day in a rice field, an animal that lived in that field was not automatically classified as a filthy urban pest. It was an animal. Sometimes a destructive animal, sometimes a competitor for crops, and sometimes protein. That distinction matters, because when modern Western audiences hear the word rat, they usually picture one very specific thing: a brown rat dragging a slice of pizza through a subway station at 2 in the morning. Little than toe. But rodent is an enormous category. Beavers are rodents. Porcupines are rodents. Capybaras are rodents. Guinea pigs are rodents. Cane rats are rodents. And nobody looks at a beaver and thinks, ah yes, basically a sewer rat with a construction job. The category exists biologically. The discussed category exists culturally. In agricultural communities, rodents that fed heavily on crops could create a very practical relationship with humans. They ate your grain. You caught them, and sometimes you ate them. There is nothing especially mysterious about that. Humans have done the same thing with rabbits, wild boar, deer, ducks, fish, insects, shellfish, and almost every other animal that happened to be abundant enough, edible enough, and catchable enough. In parts of Southeast Asia, field rats associated with rice agriculture have long been eaten. That phrase matters. Field rats. Not go into the sewer and grab whatever is moving. Animals living around agricultural land and feeding largely on crops occupy a completely different environmental context from rats living in dense cities and eating unpredictable garbage. In West Africa, the greater cane rat, often called grasscutter, has been valued as meat and is also raised commercially in some places. It is a large herbivorous rodent. It eats grasses and plant material, and in the places where people grow up thinking of it as food, there is no psychological crisis involved. Nobody needs a documentary narrator to convince them that meat is meat. The same thing is true of guinea pig in the Andes. To an American child, a guinea pig might be a classroom pet named Peanut. In parts of Peru and neighboring regions, cuy has a culinary history going back centuries. Same broad animal category, completely different story. And stories matter more than we like to admit, because for a large portion of human history, what counted as food was determined mostly by geography, availability, religion, tradition, and economics. Then cities changed the equation. During the 19th and 20th centuries, urban populations exploded. Millions of people moved into dense industrial centers. Buildings got taller. Food distribution became centralized. Waste accumulated on a scale older cities had never experienced. Underground drainage and sewer networks expanded. Warehouses stored mountains of grain. Restaurants produced constant streams of food scraps. And from a rat's perspective, humans accidentally constructed paradise. Warm buildings, protected tunnels, unlimited hiding places, huge amounts of calories, almost no large predators. We did not invite them. But we might as well have left the door open and put snacks on the table. Rat populations adapted brilliantly. That was the problem, because once rats moved from the edge of human food production into the center of human domestic space, the category changed. A rat in a field is competing with you. A rat in your kitchen is violating you. That sounds dramatic, but psychologically, that is almost exactly what is happening. There is a major difference between seeing an animal outside and seeing the same animal somewhere you believe it does not belong. A squirrel in a park is cute. A squirrel inside your cereal cabinet is an emergency. A pigeon on a plaza is normal. A pigeon walking across your pillow at 3 in the morning would change your opinion of pigeons immediately. Context is doing a huge amount of work. Rats became specialists in appearing in the worst possible context. Garbage, drains, basements, food storage rooms, dead spaces inside walls. Places associated with rot, waste, leakage, contamination, and things humans work very hard not to think about. So the rat stopped being merely an animal. It became evidence that the boundary between clean and dirty had failed. And once that happens, disgust becomes incredibly powerful. But then there is the obvious objection: disease. This is where the rat has a much stronger case against it than a lot of other animals people consider disgusting. Rodents can carry pathogens. Urban rats can contaminate food and surfaces with urine and feces. They can carry parasites. They can be involved in transmission cycles for diseases such as leptospirosis and other infections. Historically, rats are also deeply connected in popular memory with plague, although the ecology of plague transmission involves fleas, rodents, humans, and environmental conditions in a much more complicated system than the cartoon version most of us learned as kids. So no, the lesson here is not that city rats are secretly clean. They are not. And this is definitely not an argument for catching a rat behind a restaurant and putting it on the grill. Urban animals can be exposed to rodenticides, heavy metals, contaminated waste, sewage, and pathogens. You have no reliable idea what that animal has been eating or what it has been exposed to. That is a real food safety problem. But something interesting happens when people take that legitimate fact and expand it into a universal rule. City rats can be unsafe. Therefore, all rodents are inherently non-food. Those are not the same statement. We already understand this distinction with animals we like eating. Nobody finds a half-dead chicken scratching through a landfill, throws it into a shopping cart, and says, "Chicken is chicken." We care about how the animal was raised, what it ate, whether it was healthy, how it was slaughtered, how the meat was handled, whether it was refrigerated, whether it was cooked properly. The word chicken does not erase the production system, but when people hear rat, the production system disappears completely. A rat is a rat. That tells you something. The disgust is not only about microbiology. It is attached to the identity of the animal itself. And if disease alone does not explain why whole categories of rodents became unimaginable as food in some societies, then something else has to fill the gap. That something is the modern food system. Go into almost any American supermarket and look at the meat section. It feels diverse. Chicken thighs, chicken breasts, ground beef, steak, pork chops, bacon, turkey, maybe lamb, maybe duck. Dozens of packages. But biologically, the selection is incredibly narrow. Industrial food systems do not necessarily reward the widest possible variety of edible animals. They reward animals that fit the system. They need predictable breeding, predictable growth, predictable carcass size, predictable feed, predictable slaughter, predictable processing, predictable packaging, and above all, predictable consumer demand. Chicken is astonishingly good at this. Modern broiler production can turn feed into standardized meat at enormous scale. Pigs are efficient. Cattle have massive established supply chains. Entire industries exist to breed, transport, slaughter, inspect, refrigerate, advertise, and sell these animals. Once that infrastructure exists, everything outside it has a problem. It does not matter that another animal might technically be edible. It has to compete with a system that can put boneless chicken breast under fluorescent lights in 10,000 stores every morning. That is not a culinary competition. That is logistics. And logistics quietly determines culture. When your grandparents buy the same 3 or 4 animals, and your parents buy the same 3 or 4 animals, eventually those animals stop feeling like choices. They become food. Everything else becomes weird. This is why looking at other cultures is so useful. Not because other people eat crazy things. That framing misses the entire point. The interesting question is why our normal things feel normal. In Vietnam and Cambodia, field rats from agricultural environments can appear in local food traditions. In parts of West Africa, grass-cutter meat can be valuable enough to support farming operations. In Peru, guinea pig can be served at celebrations and restaurants without anybody pretending it is a desperate substitute for chicken. These people are not temporarily forgetting that rodents are rodents. They simply inherited a different food category. And once you notice that, you start seeing the same pattern everywhere. Lobster was once associated with poverty and low-status food in parts of North America. Today, people pay luxury prices for it. Oysters were once so abundant in places like 19th century New York that they were everyday working-class food. Now, 6 oysters can arrive on a bed of ice looking like jewelry. Organ meat has moved in both directions. Liver can be cheap, nostalgic, disgusting, nutritious, gourmet, or old-fashioned depending on the decade and the restaurant. The animal does not change nearly as quickly as the story around it. Price changes the story. Scarcity changes the story. Class changes the story. Packaging changes the story. A white tablecloth can apparently perform miracles. So here is the experiment. Imagine 2 animals. The first lives under a restaurant dumpster. It eats spoiled food, moves through dirty water, and may have been exposed to pest control chemicals. The second was born in a controlled enclosure. Its parents were healthy. Its feed was monitored. Its water was clean. It received veterinary oversight. It was processed in an inspected facility, refrigerated properly, and prepared by a professional cook. Now imagine that both animals belong to the same species. Are they equally disgusting? Most people will say no. Good. We already agree that environment matters. Now change one detail. Make the animal a rat. Suddenly the brain tries to override the entire thought experiment. That reaction is the interesting part. Because humans like to believe disgust is a detector. Sometimes it is. Spoiled smells can protect us. Rot can protect us. Signs of contamination can protect us. But disgust is also trainable. It attaches itself to symbols, words, places, social class, childhood experience, movies, jokes, what our parents refuse to eat, what our friends laugh at, what the grocery store wraps in plastic, and what the exterminator puts on a warning sign. A rat does not know any of this. It does not know that one branch of the rodent family can sleep in a child's bedroom, another can be served at a festival, another can appear on a farm, and another can make an entire subway car move 6 feet in the opposite direction. Those categories exist in us. And to be clear, none of this means urban rats should suddenly become food. That would ignore real problems with contamination, disease exposure, poisons, and uncontrolled diets. The point is almost the opposite. We understand perfectly well that an animal's environment changes whether it is safe to eat. We just apply that logic inconsistently. A filthy chicken does not make chicken conceptually disgusting forever. A filthy pig does not erase pork. A contaminated cow does not destroy the category of beef. But the urban rat became so culturally powerful that it swallowed almost every other version of the rodent. The sewer rat became the mascot for an entire biological order. Which brings us back to the little fur potato from the beginning. The animal with the cable tail. The garbage thief. The creature that can make a grown adult jump onto a chair like they are auditioning for a cartoon. Maybe your reaction to that animal is completely reasonable. If it is crawling out of a drain, it probably is. But the bigger question was never whether you should eat that rat. You should not. The bigger question is why one image became powerful enough to decide what an entire category of animals means. Why does a chicken raised for meat feel normal, while another edible animal feels unthinkable? Why does a guinea pig become a pet in one country and dinner in another? Why does lobster move from poor food to luxury food without changing species? Why does an animal become cleaner in our minds when it gets more expensive? And how many of our strongest food opinions are actually biological facts? Probably fewer than we think. Humans like to imagine that we look at the natural world, evaluate every animal objectively, and then make rational decisions about what belongs on the plate. That is not really what happened. We inherited a menu, and a menu is a historical document. It contains geography, religion, industry, class, technology, fear, marketing, memory, and sometimes pure accident. The rat does not know it lost the branding war. It does not know that a pig can roll in mud and become bacon, while a rodent can eat rice in a field and still trigger the word vermin. It does not know that somewhere another rodent is being raised intentionally as livestock, while its cousin is being chased out of a subway station with a broom. It just knows where the food is. So the real question is not why some people eat rats. That question is too easy. The more interesting question is why we are so certain that one animal is food and another one is filth. And once you start asking that, rats are only the beginning.